Last weekend I started reading this book, Take It Off, Kiss Truly Unmasked, all about Kiss's non-makeup era. Before I started reading that though, the first chapter in this book is all about the album Lick It Up, which is an album that I've never listened to in its entirety. So as some groundwork, I had to go and listen to that album. After that listening experience though, all of this week has been about Kiss. Hello and welcome back to Toby Jones Talks Music, where we do exactly what it says on the tin. And today's episode is all about Kiss. We have the book, I'm wearing the Kiss t-shirt. There is no coincidence that today is all about Kiss. And specifically about an era that I've not really particularly explored with Kiss before this week. And that is because of this book here, Kiss, Take It Off, Truly Unmasked. This was a book that I saw quite a while ago, and to be honest, when I first saw the cover, I didn't actually think it was about the non-makeup era, but when it was bought, I knew it was all about the non-makeup era. I do love my reading of books and music books and autobiographies, etc. But I have to be honest, I think that all the music books that I've read in the past have been by Martin Popov. And I don't know whether it's just me or the style, but I've enjoyed those books, but not rated them particularly highly. But this, I haven't finished it yet. I've only really just started it. I've only read the first couple of chapters, but I am really enjoyed and engrossed in this book. And that is really telling, because normally with a book, it'll probably take me about a month or two to read a book. I'm trying to get through 12 books this year, read one book per month. And the last book I read, which was Broken Music by Sting's autobiography, I really struggled with that. It took me just over a month to read it. But this is a good sign, because every day I've been reading this, and before bed, I've got to pick it back up again. So that is a very good sign. I don't think it's going to take very long to read this at all. And this book focuses, as I said, on the non-makeup era. So it starts with the Lick It Up album, then goes to Animalize, Creatures of the Night, which we'll talk on later, because of course it's not a non-makeup album. Then we have Crazy Nights, Hot in the Shade, Revenge, Alive Free, and a couple of the other albums and deep cuts and all that stuff that come after that. But this is a very good read so far. Hopefully I'll feature some more on this when I've read the full book. But today we're going to talk about the music, and in general, what inspired me to make this video is all about the album Lick It Up, which unfortunately is an album that I don't have at all in physical copy. I don't have the vinyl, I don't have the CD, I only have it on this little treasure device of mine, which in fact I've talked about many times, but I think it's finally making its first appearance on the channel, and that is my treasured possession, the iPod Classic. So I've only got a digital version of Lick It Up, but nevertheless, I listened to that album for the first time last weekend. And I always find with new music, because it's new to me, it's not new, it was released in 1983, the album Lick It Up, but it's new to me nevertheless. It has to grab me quite quickly. It depends what sort of mood I'm in. Sometimes I'm in a mood that's quite willing to listen to new music. At other times, if the album doesn't start well, I kind of dismiss it. But fortunately, Lick It Up starts very well. I played Exciter, not to be confused with the opening track from Judas Priest's best album in my opinion, Stay in Class, but Paul Stanley's Exciter, and wow, this really hit me, and I thought, we're in for something good here. So it ticked the box straight away of a very good start to the album. So I listened to the album last weekend, and my dad was the person that introduced me to a lot of this music when I was younger, but I don't think he's listened to Lick It Up either. He was one of those, I think, who listened to the early stuff, the sort of first 6 or 7 albums, and then went off after that. And I said to him last Sunday, listen to Exciter by Kiss, and he wasn't that fond of it, but hey, we can't all be the same. But I was really fond of that song, really enjoyed it, and the tracks that have stayed with me this week after listening to the album for the first time are Exciter and the second track, Not for the Innocent. Now, I've listened to this album probably 3 times this week. I got up very early this morning. It's only 8 AM. You might notice I've got the light on and it's dark-ish outside, but I went out for a walk very early this morning and played the Lick It Up album again. And I think I've determined from those probably 3, maybe 4 listens that the Gene Simmons tracks are the strongest, which I generally think they probably are in this era, at least the era I'm going to talk about today, of the early 80s, the first 3 or 4 albums of the 80s. So the tracks that I think are the strongest on this album are Not for the Innocent, not ignoring Exciter, which I've already discussed. Not for the Innocent, that's a great track. Fits Like a Glove, Dance All Over Your Face, and On the Eighth Day. All great tracks. Another couple of good tracks are All Hell's Breaking Loose, the start of, I think it's the start of side 2, track number 6 as it would be on the vinyl. And then A Million to One, that's another good track. But the Gene tracks are very good on this album. But I think that might be a me thing as well, because Gene Simmons has always been my favourite member of Kiss. I've been into Kiss, probably the first group I really got into, the first band I went to see when I was 9. And I've always wanted to be Gene Simmons. I've always wanted to be the Demon. And when I've seen Kiss on both occasions, the God of Thunder bass solo, goosebumps. Absolute goosebumps. So those tracks are the strongest. And I thought, wow, this is an album I've never listened to. The cover isn't exactly enticing. It's of the guys all in their non-makeup. And interestingly, I've learned from this book that they took quite a lot of pictures for this album. And the reason why the picture that was chosen was because Gene Simmons was sticking his tongue out. It was the one thing that made you go, that's Kiss. Even though the guys have got no makeup on, that's Kiss. Because Gene Simmons is sort of still embodying the Demon and definitely still does with the music. So Lick It Up is an album that I'll probably still listen to a couple more times, but I have enjoyed it. It's not the best Kiss album because there are a couple of tracks on the first side that I don't think are particularly great. Young and Wasted, Give Me More, and the third track, I can't remember what the third track is called. I can't remember what the third track's called. Lick It Up, of course. Isn't it funny when you've got one track on an album that you know very well, and you kind of dismiss it because you're looking at everything else? What's that third track called? Of course, Lick It Up. Lick It Up, a track that I've known since the early days, and I really like Lick It Up. But Young and Wasted, Give Me More, there's still a bit still to convince me of those tracks. But I have really enjoyed listening to Lick It Up this week, which has took me back to all things Kiss. I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people that a lot of the time I tend to be focused on one band or one artist. I had it very much early in the year with the Scorpions, listened to a lot of their music last year. I was listening to a lot of Chris Ree's music. I tend to just go through one artist. I do have a playlist on my iPod which is everything. So some of these songs from some of the albums I'm going to talk about appear anyway in those playlists from time to time. But this week it has been a lot of Kiss. And one of those albums that has been playing, and it's not a non-makeup era album, but I'd still focus on that album today because we're talking about Kiss in general and linking it to this book. But this is where I'm going to lose half of the viewership. Unmasked. Kiss Unmasked. What a great album. And this is where everybody switches off, because I'm fully aware that Unmasked is not an album that, particularly by the critics at least at the time, was seen as particularly great. But I have to say, I've always liked this album from the first time I've listened to it. I think I had a preconception going in that it wasn't great because I'd only heard Shandy, which I've grown to like quite a lot throughout the years anyway. But this album is so much more than Shandy. The album that came before that, just to touch on that, Dynasty, is an album that I'm not really a fan of, and maybe is just I Was Made for Loving You, which, hey, isn't the best Kiss track in terms of heaviness, but I'll go along with it. I do enjoy playing it and played it the other day, but maybe because I'm in a time when I'm enjoying Kiss more and more, maybe I just accept that track for what it is. But this is a really good album, is Unmasked. I can't remember why I started to listen to it again, but I pulled this out on Tuesday night. I didn't actually pull the vinyl out on Tuesday night, but when I had a relaxing bath time on Tuesday night, I was in the bath with the no candles, I'm not like that. On Tuesday evening, I always have a speaker, and in fact, I'll show you that now. I have a speaker which I plug my iPod into as an aux cable. It's an AC/DC speaker, so a little bit off-brand, but I always take this in the bathroom and, of course, ensure that I am safe with it as to not drop it in the bath, because that would be quite devastating. But I decided just to play Unmasked on my iPod and played the first 4 tracks, and the speaker was running out of battery, which was a crisis. So I had to cut the bath short. But I thought, you know what? I haven't listened to a record in ages, because I've listened on the iPod or the CDs, which are behind me. Let's pull this record out. So I started that from the fifth track, which is it What Makes the World Go Round or Tomorrow? I can't quite remember. No, it's What Makes the World Go Round. And I played this album, much to the dismay of anybody else in the house. I cranked the volume up so high and thoroughly enjoyed listening to it. Unmasked, I feel, is an album that there is a preconception about, pretty much all because of Shandy. Is That You? Good track. Shandy? No, it's a decent track. Talk to Me is a great track with a great guitar solo in particular. Going back to Gene Simmons again, Naked City, probably one of my favourite tracks on the album. And because this isn't as heavy an album, I feel like there's more of a focus on the lyrics, at least to my ears, and I really like Naked City from a lyrics point of view. What Makes the World Go Round Tomorrow are great pop songs, if not anything else. What else have we got on here? Two Sides of the Coin, an Ace Frehley track, great track. She's So European, what a ridiculous song title, but another great track. Easy As It Seems, a real great groove to that track. Torpedo Girl's a good track as well. You're All That I Want, even though it's a Gene track, I can take it or leave it. But you know what? I really enjoyed listening to that album earlier on in the week. But it's not covered in the book, but I thought I'd just talk about Unmasked a little bit. And that's probably going up and up and up and up in my estimations when it comes to a Kiss album. I get that people that maybe liked the debut and Hotter Than Hell don't like Unmasked, because when I think of Hotter Than Hell, I think of Parasite and Going Blind and All the Way and Watching You, which are real sort of heavy, broody tracks. This is power pop, but it's still heavy in its power. It's not heavy metal, granted, but I still think it's got that Kiss drive, and I don't think it's particularly selling out, actually. I really enjoy it. You might not, but I do anyway. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack. Let's go back to two more albums which I'm going to cover in this discussion of Kiss's 80s output and rediscovering that. And this is an album which I have, it's gone up in my estimation slightly, albeit I'm still not quite there. And this is the follow-up to Lick It Up, and that is Animalize by Kiss from 1984. This is an album that, I said that Lick It Up hadn't exactly got great artwork. Animalize is probably the poorest artwork, maybe up there with Hot in the Shade, although there's a certain charm to Hot in the Shade of the whole Kiss catalogue. I had a bit of a craze sort of 3-4 years ago when I was buying a lot of vinyl, and even though I didn't really know Animalize or Asylum, I tried to get Crazy Nights but didn't. But Animalize, Asylum and Hot in the Shade, I got all of those albums on vinyl and listened to them when I bought them. And to be honest, when I listened to Animalize first off, I didn't think a lot of it. And then I revisited it again at the end of last year and thought the same, and just thought, no, I'm not that bothered about this. Obviously, Heaven's on Fire is a great track, but apart from that, I'm not particularly interested. The interesting thing with this album is before I went and listened to it again on Wednesday, I was listening to Lick It Up, probably for the second time maybe on Sunday or late Monday last week, and I was playing Lick It Up on my computer through iTunes, and I got sort of to the end of the album, went out the room for something, and it was still playing. I could still hear it outside the room, and because I wasn't 100% on the tracks at the time, I went out the room, and I've Had Enough Into the Fire starts playing. And I thought, God, this is a great track. How have I missed this? Of course, iTunes just plays from Lick It Up and goes into Animalize. And I'd never really heard that track in that vein. And almost in my mind thinking this is off Lick It Up. Shows that I almost had that preconception that because this album isn't great, I'd go into it thinking it's not great. Maybe the same thing that other people do with Unmasked. Maybe try and pretend Unmasked is Rock and Roll Over or Destroyer and you might have a better time with it. Who knows? But I've Had Enough Into the Fire is a song that I've rediscovered this week, and it's heavy, it's great, it's really enjoyable. Heaven's on Fire has always been great, and to be honest, ever since that first listen, I've had a thing for Burn Bitch Burn, although the lyrics are horrifically corny and non-PC and not particularly great to read or sing along to, but nevertheless, maybe because I've got a Gene thing going on at the moment, I've just grown. That song has grown in my estimations again. It's a great track. And as I said with Gene throughout this era, I'll probably touch on these later in potentially another video, but I really like Gene's stuff in this era. I think of Any Way You Slice It from Asylum as a great example. That's probably my favourite track on that record. And Gene's tracks are naturally heavy, ignoring, of course, the likes of When You Wish Upon a Star from his solo album. Yeah, I really like Gene's stuff throughout this era. But I have to say, apart from the first 3 tracks, because that's what they are, Into the Fire, Heaven's on Fire and Burn Bitch Burn, I'm still not convinced by Animalize just yet. Might take a couple more listens. Under the Gun is one I listened to and thought that's decent off the start of side 2, but I'm still not convinced by the rest of it just yet. But who knows, it might take me a little while and I might get into it. So the last album we're going to cover here, and this is one that is explained in the book, because you, like me, might be thinking, why on earth is this doing in a non-makeup book? And that, of course, is Creatures of the Night. So for those of you who don't know, if you've got to this point, you probably have, the albums in order go Unmasked, which was 1980, which we kind of ignore from this period because that was an aside to talking about. It's nothing to do with this book behind me. Creatures of the Night was released in 1982, Lick It Up 83, Animalize 84, Asylum 85, so on and so forth. But this album was reissued in 1985 with a different cover off the back of the success of Lick It Up and Animalize. This is another album I'll listen to again in the week. I know most of these tracks, but I have to say I've never fully digested it as a full, holistic album. And I wish on a lot of occasions, not just this one, that with quite a few albums that I'd had the opportunity to listen to those albums in full for the first time, because maybe that might change my opinion on some of these tracks. So there are 4 of the 9 tracks that I wasn't too familiar with going into this, and that are tracks 2 and 3, Saint and Sinner and Keep Me Coming, Killer and I Still Love You. All the other tracks I know quite well. Saint and Sinner, Keep Me Coming, they're decent tracks, but not the best on the album. Killer, another Gene Simmons track, so of course I'm going to like it. Yes, that's a good rocking track, but the highlight of those I hadn't listened to on this album is I Still Love You. Now, outside of Kiss and in music in general, I love power ballads. Particularly those sort of corny 80s power ballads. I'm thinking of the likes of Alone by Heart, one of the best. But this is an excellent power ballad from Paul. Yeah, it's repetitive with the lyrics, but it's really, really excellent. And of course the rest of the album is great. Creatures of the Night, the title track. Danger's a good track, although not the best, but a good album track. War Machine, top track. Rock and Roll Hell, good track. And what's the other one that I'm missing out? Because there's one more. I Love It Loud, of course. How could I forget I Love It Loud? Funnily enough, I Love It Loud is another track that I know quite well. I think probably the best known track from this album is I Love It Loud. And similar to Lick It Up and Heaven's on Fire, when this came up in my playlist quite a few times over the last, let's say, years, particularly over the last 12 months, it's a song I've grown tired of a little bit and skip it. But revisiting it in the realm of this Creatures of the Night album, wow, well, what a fantastic track that is. I think I Love It Loud was the track that signalled Kiss is back. And I know I'm contradicting myself there because I like Unmasked. But for those fans who like the heavy stuff, that signals that Kiss is back. Back completely. And when we think about Kiss's heaviness, just as an aside, when you think of Love Gun, that last album of the big era for Kiss, the classic era as you might call it, there are signals that Kiss are going that way. I think about tracks like Tomorrow and Tonight, where it's almost more of a boogie disco, but yet people were okay with that until we got to Dynasty. Maybe I'm reading it a bit wrong, I don't know, but obviously that album has still got the heaviness of tracks like I Stole Your Love, Got Love for Sale and Shock Me, etc. But talking about Rock and Roll Hell and War Machine, going back to Creatures of the Night, those 2 tracks which I knew prior were co-written by Bryan Adams. Bryan Adams is another artist that I like a lot. I've seen Bryan, again funnily enough, I've seen Bryan twice in concert. Once on the Get Up tour and again on the So Happy It Hurts tour. And I had listened to the Bryan Adams versions of these songs because he recorded covers, I think, last year, if not the year before. Technically covers, but obviously he co-wrote the songs. So I don't know if you can call it a cover if he wrote the song originally, but I guess they were made famous by Kiss, so you could call them a cover of sorts. And although I like Bryan very much, those versions don't have a patch on the Gene Simmons versions, no question about it. I've listened to them again this morning because I listened to them last year and thought, oh god, they're a bit ropey, they're not great. And it might just be because I'm in a good music mood this week, discovering music, who knows. But actually, they're okay, those 2 versions of the tracks. They're pretty decent. But again, not a patch on Gene Simmons. But I don't think that's anything against Bryan Adams, because I don't think anybody could carry those songs like Gene Simmons does with his demon persona. You've only got to look back to Paul Stanley's version of God of Thunder. And if you haven't heard that, maybe it might be wise to leave it unheard, because once you've heard it, I don't think you want to hear it again. But that's my discussion about 3 of Kiss's albums, actually 4 of Kiss's albums in the early 80s. I am currently, I think I'm on the Creatures of the Night chapter now, so I'm reading about Creatures of the Night. After that, we've got Asylum, Crazy Nights, A Hot in the Shade, and possibly once I've got through those chapters. And what I'm trying to do before each chapter is listen to the album beforehand and then read about it and get a bit more of a connection with that chapter. So perhaps after I've read those 3 chapters, I might do a second part of this, looking at Asylum, Crazy Nights, A Hot in the Shade. But the real inspiration behind this was Lick It Up and just going, wow, that's a really good album that I've never heard before, apart from the title track, of course. I've heard Asylum before. Apart from the title track, I've never heard Crazy Nights. I doubt it, but I could be doing a video again by saying, wow, Crazy Nights is a fantastic Kiss album. I can't see it. And Hot in the Shade is, again, as I discussed earlier, one I've heard. I like that, but it might be accused of being a bit too long. If you've enjoyed this discussion, leave a like down below. You can see more of my Kiss content up here. I've done in-depth reviews of the Love Gun and Kiss albums. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and until the next time, I'll see you later.